All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Really appreciate you being with us this morning. I've got this article. Now, this is back on the September the 23rd. It caught my attention. Tom Sissom, bail program aids inmates, but jail's crowding persists. It's this New York-based nonprofit that apparently raises money locally. It's called the Bail Project. And let's see here. Specifically, they're active in Washington County. A program to reduce the number of pretrial detainees in Washington County Jail has helped 25 people gain their release in the past month. And it says here, when people resolve their legal situation through acquittals, convictions, plea agreements, or other arrangements, the bail money is paid back to the fund and is used to assist others. Anyway, there are programs out there like this, from what I can tell, to try to kind of stop this recidivism that ends up happening. People can get trapped in a cycle, especially if they're low income, when they get prosecuted for misdemeanors and things like that. And so I wanted to bring in a Conduit legal analyst. His name is Joey Williams. Joey, it's always great to talk to you, sir. Welcome back to the program, sir.
Thanks so much, Paul. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so you authored a white paper on, it says reduction of waiver of carry fees in Arkansas misdemeanor courts. So you're kind of familiar with this system. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. So during law school, I had the great privilege of working at the prosecutor's office here in Washington County. And during that experience, I learned that we kept seeing a lot of the same people come through the court system. And those people, I was in charge of the misdemeanor area, and those folks that were coming through were repeat people, Arkansans. And I noticed, and me and some other deputy prosecutors noticed that they were continuing to come through, and they were there because of not paying off their fines. We don't have a debtor's prison per se, but we kind of do. And it kind of inspired me to write a white paper, do some research on what the state pays and how much the state pays in taxes to keep these folks in the system, and what we can do to alleviate that number. It's a perfect time to talk about it, to be honest, because a lot of counties are talking about the expansion of jails, building bigger jails, and they're coming across this, they're hitting the brick wall. As a conservative, we don't want government to get bigger, because we do know when government does get bigger, our freedoms shrink, and that's what we believe here at Conduit.
And they're talking about expanding these jails and raising taxes to do it, and that's what's so disturbing about this. And so, do you think there are reforms that could be made? I mean, I know there are in my neck of the woods, there are judges that were elected based on the idea, based on this platform of, hey, we got to do something about these repeat offenders that are getting caught in a cycle. So what does that cycle look like for folks? I mean, what could possibly end up happening? Somebody gets picked up for some misdemeanor.
Sure. I mean, a lot of the misdemeanors, let's be very clear, a misdemeanor is the lowest offense in the criminal justice system. And you alluded earlier, you got a speeding ticket. I'm so surprised that you got a speeding ticket. And that's considered a misdemeanor. And a lot of folks that get speeding tickets, there's a lot of hardworking Arkansans that can't afford that speeding ticket all at once. So what happens, they appear in court, they set up a payment plan, and also there's an assessment fee that's tacked on to that payment plan. If they're not able to pay off their fine in full within 30 days, a $5 or $10 or even $15 fee is tacked on to their bill. And when you have hardworking Arkansans that are paying $25, $10 a month because that's all they can afford, they are never getting out of the system. And when they miss a payment, they get a court appearance date, and if they do not show up in court, guess what? It's a failure to appear. That's another $350 charge. A warrant's written for their arrest, which is another $300 charge on top of that. They're found, they're arrested, they're brought to jail. They can't post bail because they have no money. So you can see very quickly that the cycle begins, and you see these folks that have been in the system, that have been in the system for years, and for a $300 charge, they've paid $2,000 over 3 years, and they're still paying for late fees, court costs, court fines, and et cetera. And the thing that really bothered me and so many other colleagues is this assessment fee that's tacked on to their bill at the end of the month. This was extremely disturbing because, if they're trying their hardest to pay off this bill, this fine, they're never making leeway.
Yeah, and the incentive here, let's be honest, is one where, obviously we all want a strong judiciary. We want people, to obey the law and everything else. But come on, we know that these, like you said, are misdemeanors, and we know that the incentive here could be perverse. If we're talking about something that can't pay a speeding ticket, or let's say they get a DWI or whatever the case may be. If you're not going to be able to pay that, it's probably because you're on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. And so then you put people in these vicious cycles and, they miss a payment, then they get picked up, then they lose their job because you're going to go to jail. You're going to go like a mandatory amount of time to go to jail. You lose your job, but then you get out of jail. You still have to pay all this money to the government. So they have an incentive here because, it's kind of a cash cow, right?
Oh, absolutely, and it's another way for government to get bigger. There's our police officers are great, and you touched on that earlier. You have a police officer that's ordered to stand, at an exit to stop people for speeding. We need police officers to monitor the roads, but it comes down to the fact that our judicial system within the state needs to look at how many people are being jailed. What's really bothering that assessment fee, Paul. We looked into, during my research, where that actually goes. And half of that fee, that $10, that $15 is tacked on at the end of the month, goes to the Administration of Justice Fund. And the Administration of Justice Fund is only there to monitor the fees, fines, and costs of courts. And the other half goes back to that county, that city, for a very strict fund for their technology fees. Now, looking into every county, each county has thousands upon thousands of dollars in this fund that they only use maybe $2,000 or $3,000 every 3 or 4 years to update their computers. So this fund keeps growing, and it's what government gets bigger from this, and it's a huge issue. And also during the research that we did back in 2017. The U.S. Department of Justice came out with a great paper on some stats on what kind of folks are in jail. In the county and city at that time, there are about 745,000 inmates that are jailed locally. And 65% of that were awaiting court action, meaning they were arrested, they could not post bail, they were sitting in jail until their court date, which a court date's usually anywhere from 30 to 90 days later.
Wow.
So with this talk of expanding the jails, we very well may need to do that in some areas, but I think it's very important to look at the local level and understand some of these statistics and try to get some sort of mechanism in place with the bail system and keep folks out of jail that really don't belong there to begin with.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that is contributing for sure to this, overcrowding of the jail. And their answer is to, okay, well, we need to pass more taxes and build a bigger jail. Or that's one idea that I think is a bad idea. Likewise, it's a complicated situation though, because going back to this article here, talk about former circuit judge in Benton County, John Comstock, said the county should explore pre-arrest diversion programs that give law enforcement agencies options other than arrests for people who may have committed certain types of nonviolent crimes. As one example, he pointed to the adoption of sobering centers in other jurisdictions to handle public intoxication offenders. So instead of getting arrested for public intox, you go to a sobering center and you don't actually, and they wait, make sure you're okay, you're not going to hurt yourself, and then you go about your way. Now, to some people, that's going to be like, really? If it's against the law, you got to go to jail. But and on the other hand, we have this issue. It's like, do you want to pay more taxes, or are there other solutions? Not to mention the fact, they have made the penalties for intoxication or driving while drunk, very, very steep, mandatory penalties, and yet the amount of people, decreasing, people who are drinking while driving or whatever. I mean, it's pretty much plateaued. There's still a certain amount of people that just continue to do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Respond to that.
No, that's a great point, Paul. And I think if you look at county by county in our state, there's no consistency across the board. I can tell you by firsthand experience, I've sat in courts in very small towns where somebody was across the center line, a kid, he was still in college locally, and he was charged $800 for crossing the center line. And they were maxed out every charge possible because at the end of the day, that money goes where? Right back to the county. They want to maximize those fees, fines, and costs. They want to get that money back into the county to increase that local government. It's just a never-ending machine. And every county is different. And I don't know, we don't really have a solution. I'm not going to talk about a solution to this because it's so complex, but I think it's very important as a conservative not to just say, okay, let's pay more taxes to expand the jail because every criminal has to pay. And I, as a conservative, I believe that. But the question is, how much should they pay for how long?
Yeah, I think that's the real issue here is, how much money are we talking about? Should some of these fines be reduced? Should it be more, be more manageable for them? You get caught in this cycle, and it does contribute to the overcrowding of the jails. And at some point, it's the government really, victimizing a certain sector of the socioeconomic. I mean, and it's, the left always accuses those of us on the right of not having compassion or anything else, but that's certainly not the case here. I mean, this is a quote from the paper you wrote. The carry fee disproportionately impacts the indigent and socioeconomically depressed populations. Over the last 3 decades, court fines and associated fees have increased dramatically across the nation. The carry fee in district courts is just an example of one of those fees. The inability to pay fines in their entirety ought to be subjugated, ought not be subjugated by additional fines. I mean, I think that's reasonable at this point, don't you, Joey? Obviously, you.
I sure do. Absolutely. That's what I personally believe, and my colleagues that did the research with me believe as well. And I had the great honor to, like I said, to work in Washington County, and I had the chance to meet with so many judges and clerks in 5 different courts, and they saw this problem firsthand. And these clerks, the research that we did showed that it cost Arkansans so much money locally to just keep track of these folks for years and years. And I was able to really pull some files of the folks that were paying for years on, $1,000 fine. They paid $3,000 in 4 years. They still owe $1,200. And to look at them and say, listen, you did your time, you paid the fine, you paid the price for your penalty, and we're going to cross you off the list. You're good to go. Good luck to you and your family. You're trying to get ahead. I mean, these are hardworking Arkansans, and it's just in the lower social economic structure of our state, and it's just not fair to keep these people down. And at the end of the day, Paul, it just makes government bigger, and that's the goal of these local governments. Anytime you have anything to do with government, their goal is to maintain power and to grow, and this is just one of many ways they continue to do that.
Wow. Conduit legal analyst Joey Williams, we appreciate it, sir. It's always great to talk to you. Thanks for speaking some truth this morning.
Hey, thanks, Paul. I definitely appreciate being on the show. And to those of you that are listening, if you want to learn more about Conduit and even help support us, please visit www.conduitforcommerce.org. We appreciate everything you do, Paul. Thank you.
All righty. Hey, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. That's conduitforcommerce.org, folks. I mean, you've seen the ads, you hear the ads played. But that's certainly one way, a big way that you could help us out tremendously.